it can be hard to ask those questions about how do you bill, what's your policy for communicating with your clients. Those can be kind of hard because you kind of like just want to assume, you don't want to insult their professionalism. But I would say, no, it's your money. If they're going to be asking for a retainer, you should know those things. And you might not always get a useful answer to that question that actually helps you get a sense for what it's going to be like. Unfortunately, sometimes the only way to find out is through experience, but it's definitely something to ask. And if they have a system in place for making sure clients get information in a timely way, they will happily talk about it.
Welcome to Access to Justice. I'm your co-host, Heather Malarick from Merrick Law, and I'm joined today by my other co-host, Evan Clark from Kahane Law, and our very special guest, Kim McDonald. Hi, Kim. How are you?
Heather, you know what? Today's been an interesting day for me.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to feel totally composed for today because I was just in a hot chicken wing eating event, and I'm still suffering through the pain right now. So I'm going to do my best today, but I didn't align my schedule very well today.
Okay, so if you need a break to pat your brow or get some milk.
Yeah, I might have to drink a little bit of water. So
it's good, Kim. It helps you know you're alive.
Right.
Pain is good. Yeah, I agree.
How are you doing, Evan? What were you eating right before our episode today?
I had yogurt for lunch. It was very tasty. With some nuts.
It's a sensible lunch.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Kim needs a little bit of that to cool her palate.
I need a little bit more balance in my life.
Well, I guess the good news for today is I think Evan and I are going to be on the hot seat because today's topic is how to shop for a lawyer. And I think, Kim, you actually mentioned that you had a bunch of questions for us that folks often come to you asking what they should be looking for when they're looking for a lawyer. So maybe do you want to take it away and you can grill Evan and I on what people are looking for.
That sounds great. Just for our new listeners, and if they're wondering why I'm a guest participant in this program, my name is Kim McDonald. I'm a financial advisor and insurance advisor with McDonald Advisory of Raymond James Ltd. And the reason I'm part of this program is because there's a lot I don't know about the law, and I have a lot of questions for Heather and Evan, and I might have just a different take than a lawyer who's been practicing for a long time. So today's topic to me is great. I am really excited to ask you guys all these questions because people contact me very, very frequently. Every single week, somebody's asking me about divorce process, about how to find a lawyer, all this kind of stuff. I know some stuff. I do not know everything. And I'm ready to hit you guys with lots and lots of questions. So I think maybe first I'll sort of chip away at the different types of divorce. So we know that there's mediation. We know there's collaborative law. We know there is mediation, arbitration, there's litigation, and there's the do-it-yourself model. And I think, is that kind of most of them, you guys?
Yeah, I think that's the spectrum, Kim.
So then we potentially have different people we have to pick for different processes. So Heather, my first question to you is if people are doing something the do-it-yourself model. So I think Evan described it in our last podcast as the kitchen table model. Where are people finding the lawyers at the end of their do-it-yourself model to sign off on the agreement? And are people drafting their own agreements? Like, who are these lawyers that are just coming in at the very end of this process and not working through questions? So that's my first question to you, Heather.
That's a really good question, Kim. I guess it's kind of funny. That's a hard question because I guess I'm often at the end of that journey. So I'm not always aware where people find me. But I think people at that point are probably looking for what's called ILA in the business, or independent legal advice. So they're looking for someone to give them legal advice on those agreements and sign off on it. So maybe they're searching for that. I guess it depends how they got their agreement. Maybe they're using a mediator, or they're using one of those packages that you can buy at the car registry, that kind of thing, and then doing a Google search. So I guess the answer is it could be any family lawyer, or really any lawyer that signs off on that.
So Evan, if I called you, I was getting divorced and I was doing it myself with my husband, and I called you up and said, I've got the whole thing done. I need you to read this crappy agreement that I put together. Is that something that you're going to be interested in doing? Or is there certain lawyers that are going to be more attracted to those, to that part of the process?
If you drafted the agreement yourself, I'm not going to probably provide independent legal advice for that. I mean, if I did, my advice would probably be don't sign it.
Yeah.
Or if you do sign it, it doesn't matter because it's not. There's technical things, boxes that need to be checked for a separation agreement where there's property and spousal support involved.
So do I have that wrong then? Somebody doing it the do-it-yourself way wouldn't draft their own agreement. They would just come up with decisions. They would come to you. You would do up the agreement, and that would be something you'd be willing to sign off on, I guess.
I think the most efficient way to go about this type of a thing is, like, if the couple are more or less amicable and they're feeling confident they can come to an agreement on their own, the best thing is for one of them to go have an initial consultation with a family lawyer and just get some advice about their situation and general advice about family law and how the law applies and this type of thing. That will kind of give them a context to come to an agreement. And then once they're agreed on the various things, they don't have to write up any special document. They can just say, okay, this is what we're agreeing. And then the lawyer takes care of all the technical stuff. Because a separation agreement, which can go under many different names, but it's a fairly technical document. And so, it would be difficult I've even seen where a paralegal has offered the service of drafting the document for people, and it was not quite suitable. I had to make some adjustments myself, which ended up costing the client additional money to what they'd already paid the paralegal. And even then it was less than ideal. And this isn't like, I'm not trying to slag on paralegals that are trying to help people get access to justice. It's just that type of agreement is a pretty technical document.
So Heather, I think it was our very first podcast we did, you mentioned that there are mediators who are not lawyers. And you mentioned that maybe that could pose some problems down the road, or maybe lawyers would have an opinion on non-lawyer mediators working through a divorce. If we have a non-lawyer mediator working through a divorce, then they would have to pass that off to a lawyer at the end, correct? Like, they would not have any knowledge of drafting these agreements. And is that why you thought that a mediator who is also a lawyer is better at that particular job?
There's no rule about that. A mediator doesn't need to be a lawyer, but there's a lot of things that need to, as Evan alluded to, that need to go into a legally binding and enforceable family law contract. So I personally think if you want to make the most of your time and money, it's probably to your benefit to hire a mediator who's also a trained family lawyer, because they're just cognizant of all of the things that need to go into an agreement to make it enforceable. And you're going to shortcut some of the issues that might come up. So, hopefully they're going to be cognizant of tax implications of certain things, why a divorce judgment might not go through at the end because your agreement doesn't address X, Y, and Z, such as arrangements for the kids, both financial and parenting that judges like to see. I said taxes already, but there's just sort of a myriad of things that can be missed or become complicated. So you might go through the mediation process, have an agreement that you think is good, but then when you take it to lawyers, the lawyers are going to end up redrafting it or sending you back to mediation. So it becomes inefficient for sure to hire someone who doesn't have that specific family law knowledge.
And if we are shopping for that person, Evan, I'm curious to hear what you have to say on this. If somebody's been practicing for mediation for pretty much that's the entirety of their practice and they're a lawyer, do they lose their lawyer skills over time?
Well, they're not allowed to. They have an ethical obligation to not lose those skills. And I guess the skills that they need, like the reason that we're talking about having a lawyer mediator is working knowledge of the law and familiarity with those types of agreements and what's in use in practice. So if I don't know that any lawyer fits this bill, but they certainly could, where they're just doing mediation now, or mediation and arbitration, and no longer doing much else. That wouldn't be a concern for me. Probably they're going to be good at that, I would think. And I wouldn't worry about, their drafting skills. They're going to be good. I can't say that just like not all lawyers are exactly the same, but I think in general, if you're looking to come away with an agreement after mediation that is going to be able to be signed in front of lawyers and then you're done, I think the most economical bet is to have a mediator that is a lawyer. It's like what Heather said, it's a false economy. If you're saving money on the mediator, and then they draft the agreement for you, and then you take that agreement to a lawyer, and the lawyer's like, well, I need to change this, this, and this. And then you're going to pay the lawyer for that, which, and a lot of times it's just better if they start with their own documents that they're familiar with, their own precedents.
Mm-hmm. And in some really unfortunate cases where one issue is connected to another, once you pick out one issue, then the whole thing starts unraveling. And that's where real frustration can set in, because you think you've crossed off all the topics and you end up going back and rewriting the book. And that's frustrating and that's expensive.
And I think it's important to note that I'm not a mediator. So I'm not like, I don't really have a horse in the race, so to speak. It's just that, and Heather, do you do mediation?
I'm trained as a mediator, but I have done 0 mediations. So I'm not speaking from trying to get clients into my office. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. We're not saying this to say like, hey, you need to hire us, because I think our perspective here is just when we get an agreement on our desks and it was written by a lawyer on the other side, it's been consistently of much higher quality and much more suitable than agreements that have come from non-lawyers trying to accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember, so everybody will remember from our first episode where Heather and I mentioned that we met each other in a mediation course. So I think it was 40 hours of us together doing mediation. And I thought it was something that I learned right off the bat, which I didn't know about before, was that lawyers who are practicing as mediators, they would always talk about taking off their lawyer hat. And many of them expressed that that was challenging. So when you guys are talking today, it makes me think that mediators who are lawyers are special in a sense, like they are able to work in that environment and know the law, but not always include the law in their conversations. Is that sort of correct, Heather? Do I have the right take on that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, because as lawyers, when we're hired for one party, we have a duty to be strident advocates for them and to do our best to represent their rights and to pursue their instructions and get a good outcome for them. And it can be difficult for us to switch from that advocacy mode to that neutral mode, especially when we're talking about topics that we're used to being advocates about. I mean, the way I think about it, though, is that there are always two sides to every issue. And I think I've probably sat on both sides of the table for all of those issues. I don't know how you feel about that, Evan, but I've been the one who's applied for spousal support and been the one acting for the party that would prefer not to pay it or would rather lower their payments. I've been on the side of all of the parenting issues on both sides. So as much as it can sometimes be hard to put that aside, I think when I think of it that way, that it's a little bit easier to conceptualize that someone could remain neutral in that kind of situation, because they have experience on both sides of the table, I guess, or helping people on both sides of the table.
So in every style of divorce, lawyers are true lawyers acting as lawyers. And in mediation, they're not acting as lawyers until they draft the agreement. Is this correct? And then the lawyer hats back on, and then people get their independent legal counsel or independent legal advice, and off they go. Is that correct?
Well, and I'd say that mediators vary in their practice on whether or not they draft the agreement themselves or whether they give a report to either the parties or their lawyers to draft the agreement. But I'd say even when the mediator is drafting the agreement, they're using their legal knowledge, but they're not drafting it as a lawyer, because they're still not acting for one party or another. So they're saying, I know this about the law. I know this needs to be addressed. And I'm putting into this agreement what I heard the parties agree about this topic. That's why it's important to go and get independent legal advice from lawyers number 2 and 3 on each end of the agreement, because those people are the ones that are going to be on the client side and looking at it from the client's perspective, and saying whether that's fair or correct or.
Okay, so this is interesting. There are clear people that we are potentially looking for. And I'm thinking about the chicken and the egg situation here. Do we get a lawyer and figure out what process we're supposed to pursue when we meet with that first lawyer? Or are we first supposed to figure out what process we think is right for us, and then we go seek out the lawyer or the mediator? Where do you guys think people should start? Should they have a working knowledge of a process first, or should they just reach out to somebody and just start asking questions? Evan?
Well, I think educating yourself is always a good thing. I certainly don't want to have the monopoly on, understanding of the family legal process. I'd be delighted if all my clients were very familiar with it. So education is great. That being said, a lawyer can really help with focusing that scope of what you need to learn about, and they can really in a 45-minute meeting, I can review most of the times I can review the situation, explain the law and how it applies to their situation in a succinct way that helps them, that's easy to understand. And that allows them to kind of relax a little bit, because one of the biggest challenges that I face when I'm, in a similar situation is you don't know what you don't know. And so that can always be a source of stress because you're like, what am I missing? I could be missing something. I think I get it, but what about this other thing that I don't even know about? Mm-hmm. And so an initial consultation with a lawyer, I think, is rarely a waste. It's normally money well spent, especially like early in the process, because they can help explain what kind of options are feasible for your situation. And yeah, so I think a good place to start. And also, like, if you do an initial consultation with me, I'm sure it's the same for Heather and most lawyers. We're not locked into a relationship. You can ditch me afterwards. Mm-hmm. It can just be that transaction, and that can be it. It can also, and it often does lead to me doing more work for my clients. But I've definitely had initial consultations where it really was kind of an informative session for the client, where they learned more about the process. They learned about what's most applicable to them and kind of the options for moving forward. I think there's really good value there because you're talking about a few $100s, but now you've got a good idea of what to do next. And yeah, so I recommend, read all you can on the internet, YouTube, and you're going to get great value from having an initial consultation with a lawyer as well.
And now they can listen to our podcast. So when people are looking for financial advisors, I know generally people come to us by way of a referral. When we're looking for doctors, we go to either Rate MD or the College of Physicians and start trying to figure out how to find our doctor who's actually accepting patients. I think it was alluded to in one of our previous podcasts, family lawyers are very, very busy in high demand. How do we know who's accepting patients, so to speak? And, are we going to make 40 calls and just keep getting rejected? What is the first step if you don't know a lawyer and all you've got is Google in front of you?
I would ask around to people that I know for referrals. Hiring a lawyer is a professional relationship, but it is a relationship. So I think it is important that you kind of can suss out who you might work well with. But there's a lot of other factors that go into it as well. But certainly word of mouth from someone you trust can be a good place to start. My personal view of any reviews online is, I think it's a little dismal, because I think it's either going to be people that are very happy and will make the effort to go and post a review. So maybe really great reviews are indicative of someone who's good. But I think dismal reviews are often not reflective of that person or place or business's skills or lack thereof. I mean, unless they've got hundreds of consistently poor ratings, I don't think they're reflective. And I think particularly in law, where the lawyer is not in control of the outcome of a case, but that's often the yardstick by which we are judged. So that can be difficult. So I'd say, look at online reviews with a grain of salt. You could start with a Google search. But I think I don't know. It's a little bit of a circle. That's a hard question to answer. It's a good one though, Kim. What do you think, Evan? Where would you start if you had to start that search?
Well, so Kim's question was, how do you know what lawyers are even taking?
Right. Oh goodness. I wandered right away, didn't I?
Yeah, but I think that you answered the next question. Sometimes we do that as lawyers. You're like, what's the question you wanted?
What are you really asking me, Kim?
I think, I think most lawyers are always taking clients. It's just maybe they can't take you if you want an appointment tomorrow or next week.
Oh, that's a good
right?
point.
As lawyers get busier, then you may have to wait a couple weeks to get an appointment with them. Sometimes urgency dictates who you end up hiring. It's like sometimes I can take something that's urgent, and so I'm probably the only lawyer that can take it. If a lawyer can take something urgently, they're probably the only one. because most of the time I can't take things that are like, oh, I need something in 2 days.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's kind of what happens. But I think most lawyers are not saying to clients, I'm not taking any new clients. It's not like doctors that way. So I think if you get a good referral for a lawyer that you're interested in looking into, a lot of times it might be worth the wait to wait and go see them. Mm-hmm. And to kind of get to what Heather was driving at, we as lawyers do not create the facts. And that's what she was kind of getting at, where it's like, we can't control the outcome. We have no input on the facts. That's all the client or the client's partner or whatever. So we do the best that we can with what's given to us from the client. And sometimes there's just, sometimes people are going to be unhappy. So I'd agree about like reviews. That's tough. I think it's a tough question to know, like, okay, once you get in front of a lawyer, how do you know what lawyer to hire? Mm-hmm. I don't know that I have a great answer for that, but I think a lot can go to meeting the lawyer, getting a sense for their personality and their approach. I mean, I know a lot of lawyers. In law school, I felt like the dumbest one in the room. Everyone was so smart. So I really don't think it's a concern that you're going to get a dumb lawyer. I just, mm-hmm. for the most part, they all seem very smart to me. I think the bigger concern is just going to be, are they experienced in this area? But again, it's not like they have to be 20 years doing it. It's like, is this a brand new area of practice for them or not? As opposed to, do they have 20 years doing this or not? And is their approach, does that work with my philosophy and how I feel about things? Because the lawyers, we do have different approaches to how we go about things, mm-hmm. And philosophies for how we handle disputes. Some people are more prone to push the file into court. Others are more prone to avoid court and try and get something done outside of court. And so, yeah, and that can be difficult to find out without going to see the lawyer first, or at least having a phone call with them. But even then, it's tough. And so I think one of the keys is what Heather said: talk to your friends, get a referral from somebody, somebody that's just had a great experience with their lawyer. That doesn't guarantee you're going to have a great experience, but it's at least somebody who had a great experience with them.
Yeah. And it's one of the factors that you do get to control, I guess, in the whole process, because you can't control the other party. You can't control the other lawyer. You're not the decision maker. If a decision needs to get made, you have control of the choice of your lawyer at least, and hopefully their approach aligns with yours.
So I'd love for you guys to correct me if I have this part wrong. Mm-hmm. My understanding is that there are many more divorce cases that are litigated than who go through alternative dispute resolution, but maybe I'm not right on that. And with that, is that because that's kind of been the more typical route to divorce and there's less lawyers participating in that alternative dispute resolution, that ADR process? So what I'm leading you towards is, do lawyers have a bias when somebody comes into their office to coach them into a certain route that they are a specialist in? So maybe both of you can comment on that.
I certainly have a bias, but it's not about like what, my bias is not based on my feelings per se. My bias is based on what I've experienced being the best route to success and what I think success looks like. My bias is strongly against litigation personally. But litigating is part of what you do as a family lawyer. And so I do it, but that's kind of, that's the last resort. In my opinion, it should be, because outcomes that are negotiated are generally just better. People are happier. They get to participate in the process. And even arbitration, where there's a third party making the decision, neither of, it's where you can't work it out, but someone needs to make a decision for the parties. At least in arbitration, the parties get to say whatever they need to say. They get to be heard. And then the arbitrator makes a decision. Whereas at court, as we mentioned before, you don't really get to participate. You participate vicariously through your lawyer, and then the decision gets made for you. So I'm definitely biased, and I'm biased towards helping people get something done the most efficiently and most effectively. And the reason that is that may be less lucrative for me as a professional. I would make more money if all of my files went to court, but that I don't really believe that's true. I think I get better clients, happier clients, and that leads to better business for me, having happy clients. And I think through negotiation and other ADR tools, they're much more likely to be happy in the end, as opposed to going to court. So I don't know, to answer your question, if like most divorces go through litigation, I don't know that that's true or not. I suspect it's not. And in Edmonton, I think we are starting to move more towards alternative dispute resolution. And I think in Calgary, they already are doing that more than we are up in Edmonton. What do you think, Heather?
Yeah, I can't point to a source, but I definitely think that most divorces don't end up, at least not in full litigation, in a full-blown trial to decide everything. Here and there, you might be relying on the court for an answer to a question, but I'd say most divorces are really largely happening in lawyers' offices or in those ADR processes. I guess interestingly, under the new Divorce Act, lawyers are now duty bound to let our clients know and encourage them to use ADR processes to resolve their matters unless it's clearly inappropriate to do so. So some of those, I guess I'm guessing the circumstances where it wouldn't be appropriate to do so might be in situations of family violence or where something really needs to be decided quite urgently. So there's not the time or perhaps resources to use ADR. But that's a strong message from the government, I guess, and from the courts that they want family matters to be resolved outside of the courtroom, and a strong message to lawyers as well. So I guess in answer to your question, you want, knowledge is power. It's good to know about all the different processes so that you can go in and ask your potential lawyer and try and figure out where their skill set is. So most lawyers are going to have a broad range of skill sets, but maybe you start digging a little deeper in the range where you think you might end up.
So I have a question from a non-lawyer here, and this might sound silly, but I don't know the answer. ADR, I know, is mediation and collaborative. Can somebody go to a lawyer who is a litigator and it still be ADR without it going to court?
Great question. Yes, Kim. Yes. So ADR just stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution. And that's really referring to an alternative to court. That's really what, so when you're doing represented negotiation, so where one or more lawyers are involved representing the parties, then that is really alternative dispute resolution. And often those will move to what we call a four-way meeting, where it's party and their lawyer in the room at the same time, or by Zoom these days, hashing things out. That's alternative dispute resolution in process. So yeah, it can take any shape of resolving the dispute outside of court.
Okay. So I think lawyers are intimidating, or at least I did before I got to know a lot of lawyers. And I think if I was to start this process, I would probably maybe poke around on the Bar Association website, seeing if there was like a, sort by city, who's accepting, how many years have they been in practice potentially, and then try and start to narrow it down. Maybe I would be gender specific on my request. I don't know. My question is going to pivot here, and I'm going to ask you if genders or generations have a tendency to follow a certain path to divorce.
That is a thought-provoking question, Kim.
Yeah, Heather, if you don't mind, I think what, I don't know that I've noticed a preference, like a certain gender, like male or female trending more towards court or not. And certainly that's like a landmine trying to talk about, certainly me talking about female preferences about anything is certainly not something that I want to speculate on. But I would say, and age also, I don't know that I've noticed a correlation between younger people doing something, middle-aged or older people doing another thing. For the most part, my clients are influenced by what I advise them to do. And if there's like a fundamental disagreement about my advice, or like they just don't agree with my advice, then they're going to go get a different lawyer. So my clients generally, we're on the same page. And so that's a tendency away from court. But I've definitely had people call and say, there is a female lawyer on the other side, I'm looking for a male lawyer, or vice versa. I'm not sure why exactly, but I've definitely had clients make that request. Like they want someone of the opposite gender going up against this person for some reason.
That's interesting. I've been asked by clients or potential clients if they felt that whether I had any biases being a female towards one side or the other, as far as child support went, spousal support, that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting. I think I've been asked that twice actually. And I mean, I guess I would encourage, I agree with Evan, first of all. I don't think there actually are any patterns. I think people are people, and people have different skill sets and attitudes and tendencies. So that's not going to go by gender. But if it's a concern, then ask about it early on if you feel like that's something that will stick in your brain and be a worry for you, so that it can be addressed.
Yeah, I've definitely had people say like, oh, I need a real bulldog. And actually the ones that say that are usually male. So I don't know if that's gender related or it just so happens that they've all been male. But, and usually my response is, well, you need a different lawyer. Because my approach is just not to be a bulldog. I don't grab onto things and latch on and not, my approach is to be reasonable and help my clients have the best chance for success. And I think that's the route to do it. But there are lawyers out there who I think might be happy to take that role or to handle that type of a client and to satisfy that type of a client, what they're really looking for. So that could be certainly something that you ask. If you know for sure you definitely want to go right to court, you should definitely ask the lawyer, find out how they feel about going to court and if they're comfortable doing it and if they're happy doing it. Yeah,
that's a really good point.
That was actually a question I was going to ask, because that comes up for me once in a while. Somebody's looking for a really tough, really mean lawyer because they know that they need a very strong advocate in their situation. And my experience with that is that lawyers work across from another lawyer all the time. They're very familiar with the lawyers in the city and different personality types and style types, and are happy to recommend certain types of lawyers for what people are looking for. Have you guys had that scenario pop up where somebody's asked you for a certain type of lawyer and you just make that referral, or how does that go?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like Evan, maybe even more so, I'm pretty clear in my consults of what style of lawyer I am. So if people are looking for someone who is kind of that bulldog or on the shark end of things, they're not going to find that in me, and we're going to end up not happy with one another. We're not going to have a happy professional relationship. So often I will provide some referrals in that case to either a bigger firm that might have more lawyers to choose from, or just give them some names of somewhere else they might want to go.
Yeah, I think it's also helpful to clarify that suits generally break their code of conduct like every single episode. So like being what we call sharp practice, right? We're not allowed to do that. That's a problem. So we have a responsibility to always act ethically and fair, and we are officers of the court. So we can't deliberately do things we know would mislead the court, and we can't lead evidence that is misleading that way. It's really, there's a fine line between following our code of conduct and acting ethically as a lawyer, our professional responsibility, and advocating for our clients. We can't advocate for our clients in a way that would conflict with our responsibilities to the profession. So I think any lawyer who's like, oh yeah, you want a Harvey Specter? Like I love Harvey. I kind of have a man crush on Harvey. He's great. He's got great hair, especially in the earlier episodes. He's the man. He's also alone, right? He's got no family. Well, no. Anyways, but he is not a lawyer that I would want to be like, because to be quite frank, he should have been disbarred long ago.
Yeah, many times over, probably.
Even before he hired Mike as a lawyer. Definitely a disbarable offense.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to say, lawyers aren't really allowed to be bulldogs in that way, where they're going to be unreasonably aggressive just to take it to the other side.
And maybe that's even a point for education too, then, for that person, right? Hopefully they're going to go in and interview a few different people, and hopefully somewhere along the way, a lawyer is going to tell them what the benefits and the cons of taking that kind of approach to their file is. I mean, ultimately, those kinds of things cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time. And they take an emotional and psychological toll. So even if you're on the aggressive side and you're the one that's always biting, you're still engaging in that conflict for a longer period of your life. You're paying your lawyer for every minute that they're spending on your file to, like you said, Evan, stick it to the other side. So at the outset, that might be the feeling. That may not actually be a practical goal in the long run. So yeah, think about where you want to end up, where you want your bank account to end up at the end of all of this, right?
Yeah, and I think I share an experience that of a file that I worked on, where a client, just to give an idea of like, sometimes like you don't need to have an aggressive or unprofessional approach in order to have success. Again, the facts really dictate. And in this particular situation, I had a client who the other parent had not paid child support, but my client was a primary parent for years and years and had not paid enough. And in the end, those facts worked in my client's favor, so that my client was able to, without going to court, the other parent got a lawyer, and that lawyer had a hard conversation with their client, and my client got a consent order setting arrears at amount that's probably less than it could have been if it went to court, but was certainly fair, and my client was happy with it. and got an ongoing child support amount that was within the guidelines. And my client was very happy with that because before we started that, she was not getting that. So you can get results, but a lot of it's really going to depend on the facts of the case, not nearly as much, I think, on the lawyer.
What is a consent order?
A consent order is an order of the court where both parties agree to the content of the order. And that is a very economical way to resolve things. You can go and get an order proclaimed by the judge, but you can also go and agree. There's our guideline incomes. We're going to pay this amount in child support. I'm going to pay this much in child support to the other person. Let's get that in an order. And the benefit to that is now there's certainty because that order is law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on the Bar Association website, is there a place on there that gives a list of questions that somebody would want to ask a lawyer just to be prepared for that initial meeting? Is there a place for this?
Now, I just wanted to clarify, you said Bar Association. We have the Canadian Bar Association.
Yeah.
That's not a regulator. A regulator is the Law Society of Alberta.
Okay.
So
the Law Society makes sure you guys follow the rules, and the Bar Association gives you guys your credentials and your designations and tracks your learning, or how does that work?
No, the Law Society is the ones that, they track the rules, make sure we're following them, but they also have a referral service. The Bar Association is just, it's an association of lawyers that it's not mandatory, and they more or less, we educate each other. We have seminars weekly and stuff like that. So the Bar Association is kind of for lawyers in our profession, whereas the Law Society is their responsibility is to make sure that lawyers are serving the public in the way that's appropriate. And they have a referral service. You can find a lawyer by going on their website. I don't know, what other client-facing services do they have, Heather?
I mean, they're the society through which people make complaints about lawyers. And you can look up a lawyer's year of call, their address. And I think that the Law Society is now publishing whether they have any disciplinary history. So that is something that you can look up there.
Yeah, thank you for sorting that out, Evan, because that was going to be my next question. How do you find out if somebody's, one of the bad guys and not following the rules? And it sounds like we got to go to the legal society, not the Bar Association. And I did not know that. So that's a really important distinction. So people hit the right places when they're on the internet. Okay, well, that pretty much wraps up a lot of the things that were sort of the hot topics on my mind. I think, to your point, Heather, the referral scenario seems like the most common in most professions, where you look for a buddy who's maybe had a divorce. Did they have a good experience? Asking around is great. You can go to the legal society for the referral, pop around on different websites, and hopefully with a set of questions, you can hone in on what it is that you're looking for. So my final bit is, how do we know what to ask the lawyer?
Well, I mean, I think you would make sure you leave the meeting. You probably want to know how much they cost. That's going to be a big thing, and how you're billed. So what's that going to look like? What the next steps are for continuing the relationship. So how do you hire them if you do have a good consult and you like them? I guess, yeah, those two things I would ask for sure.
And that communication policy, Evan, you had referred to outside of our podcast here.
Yeah, I think it's important to find out how can you expect your communications to go with the lawyer, because some lawyers may communicate directly with their clients. Others may do it primarily through assistants, other people employed by the law firm. And so it's good to know. It's good to know how that works. And the number one complaint the Law Society gets is communication problems, lawyer not responding to the client. And so getting a sense for how the lawyer, like what their policy is and what their systems are for pushing information out to their clients or dealing with requests for information from their clients. I think that's something that's useful to ask. And I think it can be hard to ask those questions about how do you bill and what's your policy for communicating with your clients. Those can be kind of hard because you kind of like just want to assume, you don't want to insult their professionalism. But I would say, no, it's your money. If they're going to be asking for a retainer, you should know those things. And you might not always get a useful answer to that question that actually helps you get a sense for what it's going to be like. Unfortunately, sometimes the only way to find out is through experience, but it's definitely something to ask. And if they have a system in place for making sure clients get information in a timely way, they will happily talk about it because it's something they will have thought about, planned, and think is a good thing.
Right.
So I would ask something about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I sort of hijacked this podcast today. You guys are the hosts. I'm the guest, but I think I was the one who had the most questions about this process. So thank you two so much for answering all of these questions with regards to how to shop for a lawyer. And I think people will find this very valuable. I know I have. And I'll let you guys wrap up this meeting here. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add?
I just want to say thanks for tuning in and listening, and don't shoot the messenger. Just because you go to a consult and you might get some bad news from a lawyer, that actually might be a good sign that you're getting someone who can have a frank conversation with you and is going to tell you the reality of your situation. So that's my parting note on this topic. Thanks so much for your questions today, Kim. I think it's been super helpful to guide our conversation.
Yeah, Kim, you're a great guest, the best guest we've had on this podcast.
Super engaged.
Last video.
The only guest so far, but I guess we look forward to having more people pop in, give different perspectives, ask different styles of questions, and get to the bottom of things. So can't wait for the next one, you two.
Same here.
All right. Thanks for listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Next time. Bye.
On the streets and time.
Any information in this video is general information only and is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. Watching this video does not create a lawyer-client relationship. You should always seek the advice of a lawyer or other qualified professional for advice regarding your individual situation. While we take care to ensure that the information contained in this video is accurate and up to date, we make no warranties or representations as to the suitability, completeness, or accuracy of the information contained in this video. Any reliance you place on the information is at your own risk. Kahane Law Office, Merrick Law, Heather Mallory Professional Corporation, Evan Clark Professional Corporation, Evan Clark, Heather Mallory, and any guests will not be responsible nor liable in any way for any content, including but not limited to any errors or omissions in the content, or for any loss or damage of any kind incurred as a result of any content communicated in this video, whether by Evan Clark, Heather Mallory, or by a third party. Kim McDonald is a financial advisor with Raymond James Limited. Information provided is not a solicitation, and although obtained from sources considered reliable, is not guaranteed. The view and opinions contained in this media are those of Kim McDonald, not Raymond James Limited. Securities-related products and services are offered through Raymond James Limited, member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Insurance products and services are offered through Raymond James Financial Planning Limited, which is not a member Canadian Investor Protection Fund. Raymond James advisors are not tax advisors, and we recommend that clients seek independent advice from a professional advisor on tax-related matters.
Stole my heart from my lips. That was it.